Yo, what's up everybody, it's Listcrafts. Listen, we all know that travel is the best, right? Seeing new places, experiencing different cultures, it's what makes life interesting. But here's the thing, sometimes knowing where to go is just as important as knowing where to go. And that's what we're talking about today, guys. We're diving deep into the top 10 countries Americans can't visit in 2025. Yeah, you heard that right, there are actually places out there that are pretty much off limits if you're holding a US passport. We're talking about places with serious safety risks, crazy government policies, you name it. Some of these might seem obvious, but trust me, a few of these are gonna blow your mind. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it. First up, we're heading east to Belarus. Now, Belarus is a country with a ton of history. Think Soviet architecture, beautiful forests, the whole 9 yards. But here's the catch. The US government strongly advises against traveling there. Why? Well, Belarus is like Russia's BFF, and with everything going on in Ukraine, tensions are high, and it's not just the politics. The US embassy in Minsk is basically out of commission, which means if you get into trouble, you're on your own. No help from Uncle Sam. And trust me, things can go wrong. We're talking arbitrary detentions, harassment, the works. The State Department has slapped a level 4 travel advisory on Belarus, which is basically their way of saying, do not travel. And you know what? They're not wrong. It's just not worth the risk, guys. There are plenty of other amazing places to explore that won't land you in a Belarusian jail cell. So, what's a traveler to do? Look, I get it, you want to see the world, push boundaries, all that. But sometimes the smartest move is knowing when to walk away. Belarus, yeah, maybe skip that one for now. Next up is Iran, a country steeped in ancient history and Persian culture. I'm talking about breathtaking mosques, bustling bazaars, the ruins of Persepolis. Seriously, the place is a photographer's dream. But for Americans, visiting Iran is like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded, nearly impossible. See, the relationship between the US and Iran? Let's just say it's complicated. Tensions are high and Americans have been arrested and detained in the past. We're talking serious stuff, guys, and even if you manage to snag a visa, you won't be strolling through the streets of Tehran on your own. Nope, you'll be stuck on a government-sanctioned tour, watching what you say, doing what you're told. Not exactly my idea of a relaxing vacation. Plus, if you're a dual citizen, things get even trickier. Look, I'm all about pushing boundaries, but Iran is one of those places where you really need to think twice, maybe 3 times before booking that ticket. The risks are real and the consequences can be severe. Alright, let's talk about North Korea, the country that's been shrouded in secrecy for decades. Now, I know what you're thinking, nobody goes to North Korea, it's impossible. And you're right for the most part. But here's the thing, it's not just difficult, it's actually illegal for Americans to travel there without special permission from the US government. Yeah, you heard that right, illegal. And trust me, you don't want to mess with that. North Korea is like a time capsule stuck in the Cold War, with strict government control and propaganda everywhere you look. We're talking about organized tours where you're only shown what they want you to see. And if you step out of line, even accidentally, you could find yourself in a whole lot of trouble. We're talking detention, interrogation, the works. Not exactly the kind of souvenir you want to bring home. Bottom line, North Korea is a hard pass for Americans. The risks are too high, the restrictions are too tight, and frankly, there are way more welcoming places to explore out there. Alright guys, let's talk about Russia. Now Russia is a country that needs no introduction. From the Red Square to the Hermitage Museum, it's a place full of history, culture, and let's be real, some seriously stunning landscapes. But here's the deal. Ever since the situation in Ukraine went down, traveling to Russia as an American has become more complicated than a Tolstoy novel. We're talking about strained relations, increased surveillance, and the very real possibility of arbitrary arrests. Not exactly the kind of adventure you want to sign up for. And to make matters worse, the US Embassy in Moscow is operating with a skeleton crew, so if you get into trouble, don't expect a quick rescue mission. Journalists, dual citizens, business travelers, these guys are especially at risk. Look, I'm all about exploring different cultures and challenging my perspectives, but Russia right now, it's just not worth the risk. The political climate is volatile, the potential for danger is high, and frankly there are so many other incredible destinations where you can actually relax and enjoy yourself without constantly looking over your shoulder. So what's the takeaway here? Russia is a fascinating country with a rich history, but for Americans, it's best to admire it from afar for the time being. Next up, let's take a look at Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan is a country that's been through a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean a whole lot. Since the Taliban took control, it's become one of the most dangerous places in the world, especially for Americans. We're talking about a country where women's rights are practically non-existent, terrorist groups are active, and foreigners, especially Americans, are at high risk of kidnapping, surveillance, and violence. It's a heartbreaking situation, and the reality is, it's just not safe for travelers right now. Most foreign governments, including the US, have issued a level 4 do not travel warning for Afghanistan, and for good reason. There's no functioning US embassy, which means if you get into trouble, you're completely on your own. Look, I know Afghanistan has a rich history and a unique culture, but right now it's just too dangerous to even consider visiting. The risks are simply too high and the potential consequences are too dire. Coming in next, Syria, a place where danger lurks around every corner and travel advisories are at their highest. Now, Syria was once home to some of the oldest cities in the world, a place where ancient history and vibrant culture collided. But years of civil war have devastated the country, leaving it in ruins and making it incredibly dangerous, especially for Americans. We're talking about a country where bombings, airstrikes, and armed conflict are still a daily reality. Foreigners, especially Americans, are often targeted or caught in the crossfire. It's a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, and the situation is so volatile that even aid workers and journalists struggle to operate safely. The US government has issued a level 4 do not travel warning for Syria, and for good reason. There are no commercial flights, no functioning US embassy, and no safe zones. It's a no-go zone, plain and simple. Look, I know it's heartbreaking to see a country with such a rich history and culture torn apart by war, but the reality is, Syria is simply too dangerous to visit right now. The risks are off the charts and there's no infrastructure in place to support tourists or provide any semblance of safety. Up next is Yemen, a country off-limits and extremely dangerous for American travelers. Now, Yemen is a country that's been ravaged by civil war, leading to one of the worst humanitarian crises the world has ever seen. We're talking about widespread famine, disease, displacement, and violence. It's a heartbreaking situation, and for Americans, traveling there is simply out of the question. The US government has issued a level 4 do not travel warning for Yemen, and it's not hard to see why. The country is literally falling apart at the seams. There's no infrastructure to support tourism, no guarantee of safety, and the risk of getting caught in the crossfire is incredibly high. The US Embassy in Yemen suspended operations years ago, which means there's zero diplomatic protection for Americans who choose to ignore the warnings and travel there anyway. And trust me, that's not a risk you want to take. Look, I know Yemen has a rich history and a unique culture, but right now, it's a country in survival mode. The focus needs to be on providing humanitarian aid and finding a peaceful resolution to the conflict, not on catering to tourists. So, what's the bottom line? Yemen is facing an unimaginable crisis, and traveling there as an American is simply too dangerous. Now we've got Libya, unstable, unpredictable, and a no-go zone for Americans. Now, Libya was once a popular tourist destination, known for its stunning Mediterranean coastline, ancient Roman ruins, and vibrant culture. But years of conflict and political instability have turned it into a lawless and dangerous place, especially for Americans. We're talking about a country with no central government, where militias rule the streets, and kidnappings, bombings, and tribal clashes are commonplace. It's a chaotic and unpredictable environment, and the risks for foreigners are simply too high. The US government has issued a level 4 do not travel warning for Libya, and for good reason. Even obtaining a visa is next to impossible for Americans, and those who do manage to enter the country are putting themselves at immense risk. Look, I know it's sad to see a country with so much potential consumed by chaos, but the reality is Libya is simply too dangerous to visit right now. The lack of security, the prevalence of violence, and the absence of a functioning government make it a no-go zone for tourists. So, what's the takeaway here? Libya is a country in desperate need of stability and peace, but until that day comes, it's best to admire its beauty from afar.
Breaking news.
Next is Somalia. Plagued by conflict and lawlessness, it's one of the riskiest places for Americans to visit. Now, Somalia is a country that's been synonymous with danger and instability for decades. We're talking about a place where pirates roam the seas, terrorist groups control vast swaths of territory, and political violence is a constant threat. It's a volatile and unpredictable environment, and for Americans, traveling there is simply out of the question. The US government has issued a level 4 do not travel warning for Somalia, and for good reason. The risk of kidnapping, piracy, terrorist attacks, and getting caught in the crossfire is incredibly high. Even experienced journalists and aid workers think twice before venturing into Somalia, and those who do usually travel with armed guards and a whole lot of security clearance. The US Embassy in Somalia closed its doors years ago, which means there's zero diplomatic protection for Americans who choose to ignore the warnings and travel there anyway. And trust me, in a place like Somalia, you don't want to be caught without backup. Look, I know Somalia has a rich culture and a beautiful coastline, but right now it's simply too dangerous to even consider visiting. The risks are off the charts, and there's no infrastructure in place to support tourism or provide any semblance of safety. So, what's the bottom line? Somalia is a country in desperate need of peace and stability, but until that day comes, it's best to stay away. Alright guys, we've reached the final destination on our list of countries Americans can't visit in 2025, and it might surprise you. We're talking about Turkmenistan, a country in Central Asia that's often called the North Korea of Central Asia. Now before you start picturing nuclear threats and military parades, let me clarify. Turkmenistan isn't dangerous in the same way that some of the other countries on this list are. It's not a war zone, and you're not likely to get kidnapped or caught in the crossfire, but it's dangerous in a different way, a more subtle, insidious way. We're talking about a country ruled by an authoritarian regime that exercises strict control over every aspect of life. Freedom of speech, forget about it. Freedom of the press, non-existent. Internet access, heavily censored. Turkmenistan is a country where Big Brother is always watching, and stepping out of line even accidentally can have serious consequences. Even before the pandemic, getting a tourist visa to Turkmenistan was like trying to win the lottery, incredibly difficult and highly unlikely. But now, with the country even more isolated and paranoid than ever, it's practically impossible for Americans to get in. Look, I'm all about exploring off-the-beaten-path destinations, but Turkmenistan is one of those places where the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. So there you have it guys, the top 10 countries Americans can't visit in 2025. Look, I know it's a bummer to think about places being off-limits, but the reality is, the world can be a complicated and sometimes dangerous place. The good news is, there are still countless other incredible destinations out there waiting to be explored. Places where you can experience different cultures, connect with new people, and create memories that will last a lifetime. So, what are you waiting for? Start planning your next adventure today, and as always, stay informed, stay safe, and keep exploring. This is Listcrafts, signing off. Peace.